Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The Taliban claim to have captured the capital of Afghanistan's northern Saripul province. Meanwhile, the Taliban said the US B-52 bombers targeted a hospital in the Lashkar Gah district, killing 3 doctors. In Kabul, an Air Force pilot was killed and 2 others were injured in twin bomb blasts claimed by the Taliban. In South Sudan, at least 30 soldiers have been killed in clashes between forces loyal to Vice President Riek Machar and a splinter group. Machar's party says they killed 2 major generals and 27 soldiers in self-defense, while splinter group denied the offensive, saying they suffered 4 casualties and inflicted a loss of 28 to the enemy side. Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah says his group does not seek escalation with Israel but will respond to any Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. In a speech commemorating the end of 2006 war with Israel, Nasrallah said Hezbollah can target open land in northern occupied Palestine, Galilee or the Golan Heights in counterstrikes. On Wednesday, Israel struck targets in southern Lebanon. Brazil has recorded 990 daily deaths from COVID-19 and more than 43,000 new cases. In Pakistan, 68 people have died, while over 4,400 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia says it will begin receiving Umrah pilgrimage requests from vaccinated foreigners from 9th of August. While globally, the coronavirus has claimed more than 4.2 million lives and infected 202 million people. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Start from Afghanistan, where heavy fighting is underway between the Afghan security forces and the Taliban in the northern province of Kunduz, Saripul and Jowzjan. The Taliban claim to have captured the capital of Saripul. Details in this report. Afghans question the government's security strategy as the Taliban continue to make advances. The group says they have seized weapons and ammunition belonging to the military in the city of Saripul after capturing it. The Taliban claim to have conquered the National Security Prosecutor's office in Kunduz, where 11 people have died so far. Earlier, the group killed an Air Force pilot and injured 5 others in twin bomb blasts. Hamidullah Azimi was the 8th Afghan pilot to be killed in recent weeks. Meanwhile, the Taliban accused the United States B-52 bombers of killing 3 doctors in a raid at a hospital in the Lashkar Gah district. In a statement, the group condemned what it called barbaric bombings on civilians. It said the US is violating human rights and international norms. Okay, now we are joined by Arshad Yusufzai, a political analyst from Peshawar. Yusufzai, thank you very much for your time. Now, tell us, the Taliban are now making inroads into city centres, which were seen as the fortresses of the Afghan national forces. Tell us, how significant are these developments symbolically and strategically, and what would they mean for the people of Afghanistan?
Well, as we have seen earlier this morning, the Taliban have claimed that 2 provinces, not cities but provinces, Kunduz and Saripul, have fallen to them, and they are on the way to Kunduz airport now. Their fighters are going there and they will be able to capture it soon, because we have been hearing about reports that government soldiers are just putting up weapons. They're just laying down their weapons and surrendering. This is now the 4th major city in the past 48 hours that has fallen to Taliban, starting with Zaranj in Nimroz, that is connecting Iran with Afghanistan. And it was one of the most important border crossings for Afghanistan because all the fuel supply from Iran is through Zaranj, and then secondly through Heratan. So effectively, the Taliban have now cut off Afghan government or the Kabul government from any road line connections with Iran, and it means that the fuel supply from Iran is stopped now. Secondly, these are now cities that the Taliban are capturing. They have captured Zaranj, they have captured Shabarghan yesterday. That was one of the strongest places for them because of Dostum's militia. They have captured 2 provinces this morning, and they are pushing for fighting. The fighting is going on in Helmand and Herat and Kandahar. Now, the Taliban claim, we still have to verify this, but they claim that in their cities, where they are now in power, the people are happy and they are cheering, they are welcoming them, and the Taliban have restored peace, which they believe or they claim was missing because the forces were corrupt and they were really ineffective in controlling the situation in the cities they were there. So I believe that the Taliban are still following the policy of cutting off the Afghan government from all border crossings with other countries. Afghanistan is now only relying on Torkham with Pakistan and Heratan up in the north with Uzbekistan. That is also, large fuel depots are there. And I've been hearing reports from the Taliban sources that the Taliban want to negotiate peace there, because they do not want any harm to the fuel supplies or the fuel depots there. And in case of fighting, it is quite possible that either the Taliban or the soldiers that are fighting there could put these fuel resources to fire.
Right, Arshad, this is definitely a major blow to the Kabul government. Now, tell us, with the Taliban accusing the United States of killing civilians and hitting a hospital, are we back to square one of the Afghan conflict?
I believe so, yes, because previously in 2001, there were the Taliban had no system or mechanism to verify their claims, but now they are so effectively using this social media. They are using mobile phones with videos from all these places where the U.S. is bombarding cities. Like earlier this morning, they shared videos on their WhatsApp groups claiming that the U.S. bombardment last night had hit a hospital and a school. So the Taliban claims are verified with their people on ground sharing videos and also talking to people in the localities. I believe the U.S. is repeating the same mistake, and it's not just them this time, it's also the Afghan Air Force. It's like a blind bombardment on cities, on civilians, schools, and especially targeting hospitals now.
Well, that is big also now. Arshad, tell us, with the recent developments, do you see the United States is increasing its military role in the war-torn country once again?
I believe they learned their lessons and they're not going to come back to the ground, but they can effectively use their weaponry, that is the Air Force, to bombard the Taliban strongholds like they've been doing, and occasionally getting successes, mostly killing civilians. But the United States is now staying away from Afghanistan, knowing that they cannot defeat the Taliban, but their role cannot be diminished. They will still remain there, knowing that they cannot be harmed any further. They are relatively easy, in an easy place to continue their role in Afghanistan. But the Taliban are not happy with their role on ground as well. That is the diplomatic role the U.S. Embassy in Kabul is playing, accusing the Taliban of things that they have or have not committed without verifying facts. So the U.S. involvement is still there. They are still supporting the Afghan government as they said they would. The Taliban, on the other hand, they cannot fight the U.S. any longer because there's no presence on ground. But they are thinking of other ways of dealing with that. That could be like diplomatic ties in the future, or issues they can create for the U.S. aid agencies or people or agencies connected to the United States.
Right. Arshad, also tell us, what do you believe is the biggest roadblock for the peace process and a political settlement in Afghanistan? Well,
obviously, it is the fact that everybody is ignoring Pakistan. it's just like, if you compare it, it's just like back to 2001 in Bonn conference, that a conference is held and the major stakeholder, that is the Afghan Taliban, were not even invited there. And the Taliban have been telling everybody this, that this was their mistake. Many people in the West have accepted this mistake. Now the powers that are, they are ignoring Pakistan in the peace process, although they accuse Pakistan of having control over the Taliban, which we believe has diminished over the past years. But it is still important that Pakistan can play a major role in this peace process. And ignoring Pakistan's role is just foolish act, because how can you bring peace in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, when you claim or you accuse Pakistan of pushing people towards the war, of providing manpower to the Taliban, and then at the same time you do not invite them. You cannot punish Pakistan for trying to play a positive role in peace in Afghanistan. And you cannot certainly force anybody to come to your terms without giving them their due respect or their due credit for all the effort that they had been doing in the past. I believe involving Pakistan is important, and once Pakistan is there, serious efforts are put in by Pakistan, that is when we can see any progress in the peace process.
And certainly me, you and the entire world hopes for peace in Afghanistan. Arshad Yusufzai, political analyst, joining us from Peshawar, Pakistan. Thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now moving on, Pakistan's Foreign Office has rejected baseless and misleading allegations levelled by Afghanistan at a UN Security Council meeting. It says Pakistan's contribution to the Afghan peace process has been recognised by the international community. The Foreign Office reiterated that there is no military solution to the conflict in Afghanistan. It said Pakistan's efforts, with the support of the international community, helped achieve milestones in the Doha peace process. In a statement, it urged all warring sides in Afghanistan to avoid the military approach. The office called for ensuring full respect for human rights and international humanitarian law. Earlier, Pakistan's envoy to the United Nations criticized India for excluding Islamabad from the meeting. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, at least 30 soldiers have been killed in clashes between forces loyal to Vice President Riek Machar and a splinter group. Tensions boiled after rival military leaders of Machar's party announced that he was ousted as head of the party and armed forces. The latest clashes occurred in Magenis in the country's Upper Nile region. Machar's party claimed they killed 2 major generals and 27 soldiers in self-defense and lost 3 of their own, while Splinter Group denied the offensive, saying they suffered 4 casualties while inflicting a loss of 28 to the enemy side. The fighting threatens as already fragile peace deal between Machar and his old foe, President Salva Kiir. Now, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah says his group does not seek escalation with Israel, but will respond to any Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. He said this in a televised speech to commemorate the end of the 2006 war with Israel. Nasrallah said Hezbollah can target open land in northern occupied Palestine, Galilee or the Golan Heights in counter-strikes. He said any Israeli airstrike would be responded to in the appropriate and proportional way. On Wednesday, Israel struck targets in South Lebanon in response to alleged rocket fire by local groups in the area. Meanwhile, Nasrallah called the investigator of the Beirut port blast politically biased. On Thursday, Beirut marked the 1-year anniversary of the blast that killed more than 200 people. Poland and Lithuania have called on European institutions to help deal with a surge in migrants from Belarus. This comes as tensions between European Union countries and Minsk continue to grow. In a joint statement, Polish and Lithuanian prime ministers termed it as a weaponization of irregular migration by the Lukashenko regime. Earlier, Belarusian border authorities said it tightened control along its border with Lithuania to prevent it from sending back migrants. In the past 2 days, 133 people have been stopped at the Belarusian border with Poland as compared to 122 during last year. Last month, Lithuania had also accused Minsk of flying in migrants from abroad and dispatching them into the European Union. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. Brazil has recorded 990 daily deaths from COVID-19 and more than 43,000 new cases. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.2 million lives and infected 202 million people. More details about the pandemic in this report. The highly contagious Delta variant continues to threaten the world. In Australia, authorities in the three most populous states are struggling to quell outbreaks of the Delta variant, with millions in lockdown. The federal government announced it is investing $17.7 million in additional mental health support for people in lockdown. Authorities have urged the public to adhere to the SOPs as the situation does not show signs of any relief.
PM yesterday there were 262 cases of community transmission, with at least 50 of those infectious in the community during that time. And as we've seen in the last few days, the numbers are bouncing around a bit, but clearly we need to reduce those numbers. And I urge everybody to please stick to the rules, follow the health advice, and only leave home if you absolutely have to.
Saudi Arabia says it will begin receiving Umrah pilgrimage requests from vaccinated foreigners from the 9th of August. The country did not receive overseas worshippers for an entire year and a half. Meanwhile, India has approved Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine for emergency use over in Europe. Protests continue against lockdowns and government's rules about vaccination in France and Italy.
Today I decided to demonstrate against the Green Pass because I heard that it will be required to access university spaces. I am not against the vaccine, but I think people should be free to choose whether or not to receive it. I don't want that people who do not want to be vaccinated will be forced to do it after the introduction of this so-called pass.
Meanwhile, Tokyo Olympic organizers have reported another 26 infections among participants, bringing the total to 430. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, coronavirus has claimed 68 lives over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide tally of fatalities has risen to 23,865. It said more than 4,400 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry reported the positivity rate of tests at 8.09%. It said the caseload has exceeded 1,067,000, out of which over 961,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, the country will receive a total of 2 million doses of Sinopharm vaccine from China today. Pakistan says it delegates high priority to strengthening and diversifying its engagement with ASEAN. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi made these remarks on the organization's 54th anniversary. Qureshi said ASEAN's goals are in line with Pakistan's Vision East Asia policy. The foreign minister said ASEAN is a fine example of open regionalism worthy of emulation. Qureshi admired ASEAN for its effective measures to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. He said the way ASEAN's far-sighted leadership has forged global cooperation while retaining its centrality is remarkable. Pakistan is remembering Major Tufail Muhammad on the 63rd anniversary of his martyrdom. In a tweet, the military's media wing said Tufail Muhammad's fortitude and determination remain hallmarks for generations of soldiers. A wreath-laying ceremony was held at his native town Tufailabad in district Vehari. Hailing from Punjab's Hoshiarpur city, Major Tufail Muhammad was the second recipient of the country's highest military award, Nishan-e-Haider. In 1958, he was assigned to launch an offensive against Indian forces in the area of Lakshmipur. However, he embraced martyrdom while fighting fiercely for days with the enemy despite being wounded. Moving to Ukraine, where at least one soldier has been killed and another wounded in an attack in the Donbass region. In a statement, the Ukrainian army said its soldiers were attacked by pro-Russian separatists in the Pisky area of the region. According to the United Nations, fighting between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists in Donbass has killed more than 13,000 people since 2014. The region is one of the several sources of friction between Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Greece, a volunteer firefighter has been killed and at least 20 people have been injured across the country in fires that raged for a sixth day. The 38-year-old sustained a head injury from a falling telegraph pole, while two other firefighters required intensive care. The fire on the foothills of the Mount Parnitha north of Athens forced the evacuation of thousands of people. Wildfires have erupted amid Greece's worst heatwave in more than 30 years. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis called it a nightmarish summer. He said the government's priority has been first and foremost to protect human lives. Now, in the U.S. state of California, at least 8 people are missing as one of the country's worst wildfires scorched through the state's northern communities. Police says 5 of the missing belong to the old mining town of Craneville, where flames leveled most of the downtown. In a statement, the Palmas County Sheriff's Office asked for the public help in finding the missing. The state's largest blaze, Dixie, has burned through 447,000 acres so far. Officials say only 21% of the blaze has been contained. Earlier, a 35% containment was reported. However, better mapping clarified the area. The cause of the fire is being investigated, but still unknown. Environments say India's New Delhi was the world's most polluted capital for the 3rd straight year in 2020. Now, pollution flowing downstream from New Delhi is threatening to spoil the beauty of the iconic Taj Mahal. A thick layer of toxic foam covers the surface of the Yamuna River in New Delhi almost throughout the year. The Yamuna is known to be one of the most polluted rivers in the world, owing to industrial wastage, dump and sewer discharges. While the Yamuna fulfills 60% of New Delhi's water needs, almost the same percentage of the city's sewage finds its way into the river.
It is carrying dirt and pollution from Delhi and Mathura. It has also led to a rise in water levels. The Taj Mahal is located on the banks of Yamuna, and you can definitely see algae on it, along with other kinds of pollutants, since the water in the Yamuna is mixed with sewage water too.
During the monsoon, the water level rises and takes the pollutants with it downstream, slowing only in the plains of Agra city, affecting the beauty of the Taj Mahal monument that is located on the bank. The polluted water also becomes a perfect breeding ground for insects and bacteria.
80% pollution At least 80% of the pollution in the Yamuna happens in Delhi. It flows and slows near Agra, and this pollution accumulates here, spoiling the beauty of the Taj Mahal. Goeldichronomus insects that feed on the algae infest the Yamuna water, leaving ugly and stubborn green spots on the Taj Mahal. It is very difficult to clean these spots.
Experts say the stains could permanently damage the historical structure if this is a perpetual problem. Apart from the river pollution and green spots, a high level of atmospheric black carbon presence in its air has also been contributing to the discoloration of the monument. Now, climate change scientists consider methane to be a major driver of global warming. It is invisible and odorless, but its emissions are responsible for 30% of warming on a global scale since the pre-industrial era. This report has more details. Methane is the main component of natural gas and is over 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide in the first 20 years after emission. It is produced as a byproduct of the oil and gas industry. Methane is the major component of natural gas and, if captured, can be used as a fuel for power plants and domestic purposes. Its concentration in the atmosphere is currently increasing at a rate of around 1% per year. And experts say tackling methane emissions is the strongest lever they have to slow climate change over the next 25 years.
There is an industrial area here using a lot of methane. Why we have to put it in the sky and contribute to the destruction of our climate? So there must be more rational ways in year 2021 to use methane instead of venting in the atmosphere.
While governments around the world do not usually report leak rate figures, scientists can estimate the leak rate by looking at reported emissions and reported production. A Clean Air Task Force official says it took the images of more than 200 sites across Europe over 3 months. He said most of these sites have been leaking emissions in some way or another. And on the second visit to the same sites revealed the authorities did nothing to fix it and the leakage was still there.
Whether it's a leak or some sort of operational practice, most of these emissions can be reduced at negative or marginal costs to the company. For instance, when you look at the video of the rusted hole in the tank from Italy, you see that could have been detected with the leak detection and repair program. And then the company could have gone and fixed the tank.
Thanks to rapidly advancing technology, a growing fleet of satellites is now aiming to help close the valve on methane by identifying such leaks from space. Scientists from a European technology startup have been able to pinpoint the location, potency, and size of leaks around the world via satellite imagery. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.